Recording in progress.
Perfect. We'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. And Paul, do you want to?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, we'd like to request tabling this topic so we can consider the comments we heard tonight
Okay.
Until your next meeting.
Gotcha.
How does that apply to the 60-day
That's what I was
rule?
wondering, yeah.
So, go ahead, Kendra. I was just going to say that, as Kendra alluded to, the 60-day comment period was June 5th, and so this would be extending it that additional 60 days with preliminary plats. We can go to 120 days, so we would be able to do that. That deadline is August. We get the exact day in August, but that's where.
Mr. Mayor, we hereby grant the 60-day extension, and we'd be happy to put it in writing.
Okay, thank you. So what?
I would make the motion to table with that 60-day extension,
60-day extension.
if that makes sense.
Do we have?
What would John Bottom say if he were here?
Was
Never-
that
never know.
applicants,
If-
the landowners got a...
If we got a minute, I did leave
Yep, absolutely.
public comment for the landowner too.
We did have a first on that. Did you want to
I'll second it.
second it? And then any discussion on it? You want to? Well, okay. So all those in favor, say aye.
Can I just say for one thing for discussion? I appreciate you doing that because I don't think we were going to be at a point tonight where we were going to have a consensus. I think having a fifth council member here will make that decision.
You're welcome.
And Greg, yeah, if you wanted to speak, sorry, I didn't mean to.
And I just, my wife and I have lived here for 23 years. We went through tremendous uncertainty with Eagle Brook, and we're going through tremendous uncertainty today. And I hope we're going back to his request, I would hope that we can get back on the agenda in 2 weeks, not 60 days.
Gotcha. Yeah, we will see what we can do.
We can work
That
with
would
the
be my
applicant.
request.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I'm moving or where I'm going, and I'm not a wealthy man, as pertained to several people here, but as a courtesy to a longtime resident, I'd rather have the meeting in 2 weeks, not 60 days.
If you're ready, we'll be ready.
Yep, we'll make sure to reach out and
All right, thank
keep you posted, of course. Yeah. So we did have a motion and a second on that. Was there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Council.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. We'll go on to ProTech. We have a sketch plan for ProTech, and maybe just kind of a general idea of what you guys are looking at. Thanks for waiting. Sorry it was so late in the agenda. And Aaron, thank you for waiting so patiently. I know yours is not quite last, but only one more.
Would you like a staff presentation on that?
Yeah, maybe just a quick overview. There's kind of a lot of different items, so maybe just an overview of what the main discussion points are.
So the application request at this time is informal comments on a sketch plan for an expansion of ProTech Auto Repair at 7591 Commerce Street. The expansion would include adding 3 repair bays and warehouse storage space to their building. They are asking for various flexibilities from the city code, and staff has identified a few other areas of flexibility that would need to be granted for the sketch plan to be approved as is without any changes. I think I summarized the main points on the next slide. Oh, I guess I did not. 1 second. I apologize. Okay, so the main issues for the council to discuss tonight is the issue of outdoor storage. Speaking with the applicant, most of the vehicles are out of the site within 72 hours. However, when I visited the site, there was at least one trailer that had been there for at least months, if not years. And there's other vehicles that sometimes have to stay more than 72 hours just due to parts at this time, even just the owner of the vehicle being able to pick up the cars within that amount of time. So I believe a compromise approach to dealing with the outside storage would be to identify an area in the back of the site that would be dedicated to the vehicles that need to remain for more than 72 hours. This area would not need to be paved, but we would need screening of 80% opacity, or we would need flexibility from the 80% opacity rule. I don't believe a fence would necessarily be needed. Usually applicants choose to go with a fence, but just because it's cheaper way to reach that opacity, but they could potentially achieve this with berming and landscaping as well. So basically, as far as outdoor storage, a summary of that is, does the council agree with staff's approach to avoid a variance from the screening requirement? Or is the council open to granting a variance from the 80% opacity rule as desired by the applicant? Additionally, is the council open to allowing outdoor storage areas that utilize gravel if located in the back north portion of the site as part of a CUP? And then another issue is parking. The applicant is requesting that we grant a variance from our pavement, concrete curb, and gutter requirements that are outlined in code for existing parking lots. And it's something that we have required of other businesses in the area, including Lithgow, as well as Westside Tire most recently. Additionally, there is a drive aisle on the west side of the property that unfortunately encroaches into the neighboring property. I pulled the original site plan that was approved in 2000, and it does show that when it was approved, it was supposed to be 10 feet off of the property line. So it's not supposed to be in the drainage and utility easement that is there, and it's not supposed to go onto the neighboring property. So it is not there's no protection as a nonconformity. So it does need to be something that is addressed with the site improvements. Additionally, is the council open to considering a variance to allow, the parallel parking issue actually we believe has been resolved after discussing with Kendra a bit further on that. We have a clause that allows for uses not defined for parking to basically refer to outside manuals. So I think we can forego a variance for the parallel parking that they're showing on the site plan.
Okay.
However, there is the drive aisle between the 90-degree parking and the parallel parking is only 19 feet, where 26 is really required. So we would believe there's safety issues that we would have to consider further with that, but to have that as shown, it would require a variance.
Okay.
Streets and access, is the council open to a variance for a 33-foot curb cut where 32 was allowed and 24 was previously approved? And does the council want to direct staff to waive the use of concrete drive aprons that are based on the city standards detail plate ST13? So that was something identified in the engineering memo. And then the building standards is the applicant would like to, the building is currently painted concrete block, and the applicant would like their expansion to continue with painted concrete block, and that is not currently an allowed material. So they're asking for that to be waived. And then additionally, when buildings have been, when there's site improvements, buildings have been required to update their existing facade to 25% of a approved material on one of our lists. This can be waived through a conditional use permit. But I will note that there are buildings right across the street, two existing buildings that we did not waive that requirement for and required them to update that. So it's just something to consider. That's all of what was identified by staff. I don't know if the applicants have additional comments after reading my staff report. It's very possible that there's additional things they'd like to say. So.
Did you have anything you wanted to add? Yeah, it'd be great if you could go up.
I'm Tom Gleason, and our address is 7591 Commerce Street. I'll try to do these as I remember them. The building material, we're proposing it's a colored block that would be gray, that would, as close as possible, match the painted block and eventually get them both the same. But it's not plain block that would be painted to match. It would be a gray color there.
Your blocks are textured also? No, there's...
Some of them are on the top,
flat.
and the corduroy across the top of the existing building is no longer made, so we've got to try to find something that's of a similar style. I've never thought of the fact that we store vehicles. I mean, we work on cars, there should be cars in the parking lot. This just seems only natural to me. But in looking at it, I mean, I have a old Bronco that we use as a push vehicle. It never leaves the property. We have a little S10 pickup that we use mostly now just to run tires to West Side and back. So that sits there all the time. The rest of the stuff is pretty much moving. I've got a motor home there that, you know, I'm not going to promise, but potentially that might move inside through this. And the warehouse part of it, I don't want to misconstrue with that term. I mean, this is just storage for, we've got equipment that we're, you know, trying to find new. It isn't a matter now of when we go to buy a new piece of equipment, if we can afford it or if we need it, it's where are we going to put it? There just isn't room. So this is extra room for the tooling we need, just space to work. I mean, we're tripping over ourselves. So and the other thing with screening, I mean, definitely we can call a storage area in that northeast corner. And I think with just the natural lay of the land, I checked the survey prior to coming, there's 15 feet of fall between the driveway and going up towards that pond. Now, you're requiring screening of 3 feet high, is that correct?
For parking where headlights would shine onto the road, that'd be 3 feet
Well,
high, yeah.
I mean, we're well below that, and there is a good buffer on the east. There's sumac all along that drainage ditch that is on our property. We own the drainage ditch, and all the trees that are in there, I mean, screened right now, I think, pretty good, and we'd be, proposing cutting that berm just around. The front part will stay, and we'll pick up more parking there. We have the potential for, I think, quite a bit more parking. It just isn't laid out there. The architect just said, here's what you need, we'll put that down, and the rest was kind of a, let's figure it out as we go, what makes the most sense to make things navigable and stuff like that. And the aisle in the back, I think the building is at the 20-foot setback right now. So I don't know how we could do this.
I had a question on that.
Yeah.
Do you need to have a drive aisle behind the building?
Well, it's a nice escape route when we have deliveries come and stuff like this. They usually come to the front. A uniform truck comes in. He parks up there, unloads. He's there for 45 minutes. This can really disrupt business, so we can sneak around the back and get in where we need to. Same thing just for customers dropping cars off and stuff like this. It's a good way to get out and not have to worry about moving cars and stuff. And on the south side, the aisle being 19 feet instead of 26 feet, I mean, I fully understand the safety issue and stuff, because if we damage a car on our property due to backing into it or anything like that, guess who gets to pay for that? So, I mean, that's my risk. I see it and we address it because we're constantly, we've got a helper that's one of his major jobs is to keep that aisle open. And when people drop stuff off, tow truck might drop stuff there. Most of them are pretty well trained. They know where we want it. It's not right there. So we police it ourselves. I mean, I just don't see that being a concern that the city should have, because it's my responsibility. I'm the one going to have to pay for this if something happens.
Are you talking about the width of the
Yeah,
drive out? Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we've, for 35 years, been getting through there just fine, and I had no clue that there was an issue there.
Gotcha. Yeah, my only major concern would be if it's a specific public safety concern.
And the public don't go there.
True. But yeah, I guess I'd want more feedback from public, from Matt.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for our Director of Public Safety, but ingress and egress when there's an emergency situation as well. The public generally might not access it. The ability for our emergency responders to access would be important.
Yeah. I would say
Like a
inherently.
fire truck issue? Is that the,
Potentially. I would want to understand, I don't know that they've looked at,
Yeah.
generally they don't comment on.
I would say I'm not inherently opposed to some sort of variance if it's possible, if there's not a public safety issue raised by Matt on the Public Safety Department. But I don't know if we know enough information on that right now. to kind of give-
Unfortunately, they weren't able to review the sketch plan at their last, we didn't have the materials.
Yeah. We were trying to turn this around quickly at the
Gotcha.
direction of council, so we missed that
Gotcha.
meeting, so.
Gotcha. I think that would be an easy determination there. If there's a public safety issue, then maybe we'd not be in favor of it. If not, maybe we could look at a variance.
Okay.
If everyone else kind of felt generally the same. The other aspect of that is is it 2 feet that goes onto the neighboring property? Is that same drive aisle?
No, that's a different drive aisle.
Different
So
drive aisle.
there's the drive aisle to the west.
Okay.
And yeah, that's the one that starts to encroach on the neighbor's drive aisle and is within our D&U easement.
Gotcha. And I'm not sure what to
That
do
could
about that.
well, I mean, 2 feet, we can move it 2 feet.
Okay.
We only have 20 feet, so we
Mhm.
can't move it 10 feet and have it 20 feet.
Gotcha.
So, but we could certainly move it so it does not encroach.
I mean, I think that would be a probably a good start, because I don't think we could
And
improve
honestly,
anything
I
on
think that happened
different
due to
property.
wash, because all the water from that property and
Just
the one
over
above
time.
it come right down there.
Gotcha.
And it washed the gravel over there, so it looks like we did it or moved it there, but
Gotcha. Oop.
that's just
Gotcha.
what nature did for us.
Gotcha. Yeah, then maybe that's a good first step on that one to get onto the property.
It would end up being, if I may, Mayor, it would
Yeah.
end up being a significant amount of grading, which they're already going to do on the north side of the building for this addition, so
This would be easier to do when they're doing that, you're saying?
I think so. I know this.
And I apologize, Mr. Mayor and council. The other issue is that it'll likely need to be a 20-foot width. I think that's what he's alluding to. It'll likely need to be a 20-foot width for public safety because of.
That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, that's where it starts to get tricky. So I think we would have to look at that D&U easement and possibly, I don't know if we could do an encroachment or if we can look at evaluating whether it's necessary. I don't know if Kevin can speak to that. But yeah, it is tricky.
Is he required to have a drive aisle around his building? If this
No.
if this building was built right now, as it is, and he
I know-
didn't propose a drive aisle behind it, would the city require him to put a drive aisle on the west side?
Public safety generally likes to see the ability to circulate, especially fire.
But a lot of our buildings in town don't have the ability to drive around them.
Yeah, I think we would have to look at the fire suppression ability. I think it has something to do with like the hose pole rules. So I think there's ways around not having the drive aisle if they can't get back there, but we'd have to.
And my question gets to is why would we make them move it if we didn't have a requirement to even have it in the first place? Other than to move it off of the existing neighbor's
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to get rid of it, that would take care of it, but we'd have to look.
Well, I
at
mean,
the-
why would he have to get rid of it if we don't have a requirement to have it? Can't he just have it?
Not in our D&U easement.
Why no, not in the easement?
But outside of that,
And then, but then if it's a drive aisle, then we needs to have the 20, needs to meet the minimum for.
And it can't be a
Better
one-way
than-
drive aisle,
drive aisle
10
than-
foot wide.
Well, we could ask that. I know that the way it is right now, it'd be a 20-foot minimum is what we are anticipating from public safety feedback.
For two-way, but a one-way, that's what I'm saying is, right now, I know they go clockwise around that building. They don't come the other way.
But I mean, when we talked about West Side
Yeah.
originally before you were on council, and we talked about them moving their storage to the back of the building.
There's no back.
Well, that was a proposal before we landed where we're at now, is
Yeah.
that they were gonna move storage. It was proposed that they would move storage to the back side of their building with access from the west side of their building. That wasn't gonna be a 20-foot drive aisle with access for emergency vehicles. That was purely an access point for them. So my point is, do we really need to require a drive aisle around somebody's building? Even if they want to use it as an access point, do we really need a public safety drive aisle clearly around someone's building?
I could definitely have that looked into further. I think the issue would still be, even if it's a 10-foot drive aisle, and that's something that there's no other concerns, or it's in a D&U easement, and it needs to get off the neighbor's property. Those are my two concerns.
The neighbor's property sounds easy enough to get
Yeah,
off.
no, that's fair enough, but it's a matter, I guess, the big issue then would be the D&U easement.
Gotcha. But yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying, that why, it doesn't seem like it should be that big of an issue if we're not even requiring that they have it.
No, yeah.
Then not to open more worms, we don't have a drive aisle around City Hall.
Maybe we should put one in.
Sorry. Trying to put on a common sense hat.
So that,
We do a fire.
that kind of tackles some of the issues. Regarding the kind of combo outdoor storage, and I know you touched on this a little bit, Tom, outdoor storage and gravel areas, my first instinct would be to do something like we did at West Side, where for the identified outside storage areas, we did allow the gravel. And we required the pavement in the other areas of the lot. Seems to be consistent with that. I think that the theory of that plan, I haven't seen it in action yet, but I think it worked out well. I think it cuts back on some of the paving requirement, which you'd be in favor of.
Well, I guess we've got to run some numbers here,
Yeah.
but I heard once that one of the concerns was that gravel got dragged onto the city streets. Well, I have no problem paving that entrance, and if it's 33 feet but can only be 32 feet, great. It saves me money in paving. But, and that driveway, as far as I know, has been exactly the same since the day we built, that I don't know if no one ever measured it. It said 24 feet on the print and no one ever measured it. I don't think it ever changed. And unless it got a little wider when they did the sewer, or excuse, yeah, the sewer goes out that way. I mean, they dug it all up, but
Gotcha.
I don't really, there was no intent to make it any wider. I don't care. It's just not a point. I was kind of surprised at that too.
If I can ask quick, Tom, the
Yeah.
storm water easement to the east of your property, is that ditch on yours? It looks like it is.
It is,
And
as
then-
well as the pond.
That
It's on my
stormwater
property.
pond on the backside is yours,
Yes.
and we, the city, cleaned that all out and stuff this last year. And such. And that water all drains through the creek down through City Park. Is that the direction?
Correct, yep, it goes west and then north through the city park.
And when we built, we granted an easement to the city for that stuff there, so.
Thank you for doing that.
When we talked on the phone, you raised a bunch of concerns about overall arching ordinances and,
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
talking
I
about
guess I
addressing-
heard that when, because I guess I felt, at least with past councils, there was no room for negotiation on this stuff. This is the way it is, and that's what you're gonna do. And when some of you were running for council, or just when I've talked to you in on different situations about this, I would bring it up because it might have been talking to you about something else, but I would bring it up because it's a concern of mine. And that, well, you know, if it doesn't make sense, then we shouldn't do it. And I mean, we are in the very back corner of the industrial park there. I kind of picked that lot for that reason too, is that we're out of everyone's sight. We don't, you know, cause a problem. We're not the face of the city, where everybody that's coming in or leaving is driving right by us, and they're gonna see this, and if they consider it a blight, it bothers them. We're in the corner back there, just trying to do our job. And I don't see where the standard should need to be as high for a property that is less visible than something right out on the main thoroughfare. And they said, oh yeah, there's probably no reason we would need to do this stuff. But in order, if this is the case, then let's amend these ordinances so that it reflects this, and you don't have to go through this stuff all the time. I don't, you know, I'm not against paving, except that I gotta pay for it. And I think that should be a decision that I make with my customers. I don't want to come here anymore because I'm getting my shoes dirty walking on your gravel. Well, now I maybe better take a look at the way I operate my business. But how does the city gain by having me do this? And how is the world a better place? You know, you pave, you increase the water runoff, the speed it's going. Our gravel is not totally impervious where it can soak, it immediately soaks into the ground. It doesn't, it runs off. But it isn't, we create sometimes more problems than the problem that we didn't have that we tried to solve. And I just don't see the sense in it. Common sense should be applied more, and I get it, it's hard to do a ordinance, policy, whatever, that you can use everywhere and it fits. That doesn't happen. But maybe there should be consideration for the further off of Main Street we get, the more latitude you can have.
Gotcha.
Could we look at this in terms of, for the new parking area, whatever that area is, would be considered an improvement that has to meet current standards, so you would have to pave that, but existing area could be left as a legal nonconformity?
What are you defining as the new parking area versus the existing parking area? You're talking about the new, basically the spots
The
that
additional
weren't on the
spots that they have
initial.
to create, yeah.
I think it's more of an issue of having the front part of the parking lot paved. It's my understanding, but
So we would rather have the front paved than the new part? I don't have a problem with that, I'm just asking.
well, we would like it all, to meet the city standards, it all needs to be paved. I think where we could grant leniency and have granted leniency in the past is where there's outside storage versus parking.
Kind of would be the new area where we take the berm out. It's way in the northeast corner.
So if that area was designated for outdoor storage and we screen it for outdoor storage, then I think we can make the argument that that does not need to be paved.
That's what I would personally.
So how much would they have to pave?
To meet city
Depends how
standards,
much.
they'd have to pave the rest of the parking lot.
Define the rest.
It depends how much outdoor storage they define.
And see, to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because that's not changing. That's not part of the improvement. And I was also going to propose the idea, if you're willing to move your cars every 3 days within the lot, it wouldn't have to be considered outside storage. If you've already got a runner doing that
Yeah,
stuff,
no.
maybe that's another degree of flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, except for the motorhome, that might sit a little longer, but everything else almost gets moved daily, weekly, for sure.
If it's all parking though, then it would all need to be paved. And it's not protected as a nonconformity.
The storage actually gives it more flexibility to be
Yeah,
gravel.
that was kind of the compromise approach. That's why I was kind of pushing that. So, but it's not, the unpaved parking lot is not protected as a nonconformity. It's something we require of all new business, or all existing businesses when they're doing site improvements. So if we're gonna grandfather this in as a nonconformity all of a sudden, that means we're never gonna be able to get any of the other businesses when we've already required businesses to do this. So I do think where we can, I want to grant them flexibility too. I'm not trying to be, not trying to be a stickler, but I do think that we have to look at treating businesses the same as much as possible, because that is what our zoning ordinance is in place for. Because the idea of the zoning ordinance is you have standards and you apply that uniformly across the board. I understand that that causes issues, but if we can justify varying standards with some things and we're open to that, then I think we can do that. But to say it's a nonconformity and it's grandfathered and that's why we're not going to make them pave it, it won't work for anything else.
I think my gut tells me to say, try to get creative with the outdoor storage and see where that at least gets us to the starting point.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but, you know, this is our only chance to get this done. Where is the benefit to the city?
And Dean, did you have
When we talk, that, give me some time to think about that question. that paving, are we just talking paving, or are we talking adding curb and everything else?
Oh, correct. I mean, the standard for parking lots is pavement with concrete curb and gutter.
And that's what we did at West Side.
If that's what we, my understanding is what we did website, is what we also required at Lithgow Auto recently too. I'm sorry, what?
No, never mind.
Napa? Yeah, so I mean, it is, that has
That
been
was
our.
a whole new building, right?
Well, correct, but it's, again, it's an existing site, so it's with, I mean, they're definitely making changes to it, but it's an existing site with very similar zoning and a very similar area. So again, why, the question is, for our facts of finding, why is this site different than those sites that we can justify a variance for that standard?
What's the required parking? How much do they require to have for parking lot for this? It's based on the square footage?
So, they are proposing, let me go into the parking standard.
Plus, I think it's like bays and like 5, or am I mixing?
Yeah, so I struggled with the parking calculation because we don't specifically call out auto repair, we call out auto services. So if we consider this auto service, then it's X amount per bay. I'm trying to see if I can find it real quick. I don't know if I really went into it. And then they also have parking spaces based on our office calculation, so that's how they reach 20, I think it's 23 that they're showing. My concern is when I was at the site this last week, there were at least 33 vehicles, and I believe I'm undercounting it because I took photos to try to capture all of it. And I don't know, so I tried to undercount it, and I didn't count my city car because I felt like that wasn't fair. But there was at least 33 vehicles out there, and if they're going to be expanding, that demand is going to increase. So I was suggesting that they also include parking space based on their new warehouse use that they're expanding for, but I don't have the number that would be because I don't know how many employees they have on their shift, and that's the formula used for that. But I think they need to have at least 33 parking stalls.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
The, calling it a warehouse triggers that other parking calculation. We're not warehousing, we don't have extra shifts coming in. It's storing our equipment, servicing some cars, and storing some parts that we don't take shipments in and stockpile parts to resell. It's just working in a business, so that word warehouse triggers different parking and different criteria, and I don't want to steer us down that path for just our services.
The other question too, Natalie, and I know you were ready to speak, but these 2 bays that are being added,
3 bays, yeah.
3 bays, are mostly, and assuming the size and dimensions and stuff, are larger vehicles, trailers, those kind of
Trailers,
things.
that type of stuff.
So we're not, they're defined as 3 bays?
That's in the
Because you
narrative.
take this area and you take the other, you got 4 bays right now with
6.
cars. Is there 6 on that side? See how bad I am?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in
But I mean,
total-
these are larger vehicle bays is what they are.
So we totally have 9 bays then with the addition.
Correct.
So 9 bays plus their office space gets you how much?
To the 23.
To 23.
23 or 33?
23. I'm
Okay.
saying, based on current conditions of the site,
Waiting and everything, yeah.
they need at least 33. And so, I mean,
Why 33 from 23?
because that's how many I counted while I was out there. And that wasn't including the city car, and that wasn't including the vehicles that were in the bays themselves. And
So when
it-
they went out to site, that's what they saw.
Yeah, but I mean, it might be 33 one day, it might be 5 the next.
No, fair enough, but that's why I was saying to go base it off, like, use the calculation for the warehouse. I just think that basically my concern is our calculation for auto service stations, we believe was more creative for like car wash bays and things like that, where there really isn't a lot of long-term parking, and where a lot of vehicles are accessing the site at once. So I don't think it's a really true calculation for auto repair. I looked at other ordinance examples for auto repair specifically, And the formulas just range outrageously, so it wasn't like I could tidy it up in a nice table for you to be like, this is what other we could do. But that would be, our recommendation would be to look at auto repair specifically and find a formula that would work with the site and work with how they're actually using the site. But I do think 23 parking spaces grossly underestimates how many vehicles are at that site at any one point. While there always might be extra vehicles, I think that we can do better. And I think even speaking with the applicant, they said that they could probably accommodate more parking, even with the expansion. So I'm just trying to find a number that actually makes sense with how they're using the site.
Yeah, because we just put the required amount of parking with that square footage calculation. So there's parking on the northeast corner of the addition that will most likely end up being, employee parking, but we didn't define it because until we physically can move through how this is how you drive, where you want to park, is this in the way, we don't need to define them, but there's going to be more parking spaces there, we just kind of lay them out to physically drive something through lots. This is a good spot. I don't
My fear is though that expands the pavement.
Well, that's where my point is. I mean, instead of calling it a warehouse, I would say you're adding 3 service bays, and Tom's a pretty big guy, so he needs a lot of elbow space in his service bay, and there's no warehouse in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. It's
and I'm wondering-
storage for equipment storage.
I'm wondering, if you look at outside storage, can you move him? You got a runner that's running cars, right? So that they could actually move customer cars into storage directly, which would be screened in gravel. So that would cut down on paving requirements as well.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
How many employees do you have, and how many are you figuring you'll get with this addition?
Maybe one more. Right now, we've got 9, I think, including ourselves. And the one, I don't know when that would come, but we've got I guess I'll call him part-time right now. He goes to college for automotive. He's there right now in the summer. He's going to go back to school again, and we're counting on him joining us full-time when he finishes school in a year, but that's our 9. So it isn't even, I guess, yeah, I'd like to see it grow, but I don't know that it's going to be as much as what you might think. It's more giving us room to work.
Biggest thing is right now, you got a car in a bay.
You take things
You wait for
apart.
parts, you put another car in another bay, you got
Yeah.
one bay sitting idle with a car in it.
Yeah,
Is the general,
it's very hard, especially in the climate we're in right now with parts. One of the cars we talked about, catalytic converter was sold. They told us 12 weeks minimum before they expect to see anything. So what do I do?
It's a long time to have your loaner out.
It is.
oh, yeah, I forgot about loaners. How many loaners you guys got?
11, I think.
Yeah.
Hard to tell.
My biggest thing, I would love to be able to help out because they do a significant amount for us as a city. All of these service groups, all of our automotive folks and stuff, they are busier than I think number of people can imagine. And it would be nice if we could do something to help out. I know we've got West Side, I know the Lithgow changes and stuff, but we've got some different businesses down there that at times you couldn't drive a vehicle into their gravel because you'd lose it unless you had a tow truck waiting. I know these guys do a good job keeping that going, but
I understand the challenges of staff, though, and having to apply an ordinance.
Yeah.
And the ordinance
Agreed.
is there to improve the city over time, right? To bring us forward.
And it's tough to cut that designation somewhere within it.
Yeah, that's my thing is, how can we be creative to help you and still help move that forward, that bar forward, right? So 3 service bays, not a warehouse, is one step in my mind. But it doesn't get you where I think you need to be. you know, because it's still
Can-
23 parking stalls to pave, is still a lot.
I think depending on how
Because
the
if-
outdoor storage shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, you might not need to expand parking at all if you can have a lot of outdoor storage space for the rental cars, sorry, not rental, loaner cars, staff, whatever they're storing longer term.
Yeah, I think that would be my first step, is to see where that gets you. And I'm happy to meet, and we can kind of see where, you know, how far off that is
Yeah.
maybe for you, or if that's
What do we-
And it gives us some direction anyway.
yeah.
What about building material? Are we okay with that? I'm gonna call it a textured or a raised block kind of deal.
Well, and it
a
might even be,
continuous-
I don't know what it's gonna be, let's just call it cement block, but it's gonna be colored, it's not gonna be the, I don't know, natural, whatever you wanna call it, this has got dye in
Integrate
it.
colored
Yes,
blocks.
it's dyed
Fancy.
so that it's going to match as close as we can come to the gray we have, and we'll continue the stripes around the top. I don't know exactly what's gonna go up there, because the exact block that's there now doesn't exist anymore. So, but they make stuff similar, and that's what we're gonna go with.
Did you have thoughts on that?
No, I'm all for if they can replicate the existing blocks and those kind of things.
Gotcha.
I don't think we need to.
What was the issue that it just,
With painted concrete block?
yeah,
Okay, so the only types of concrete block we allow are decorative and integral colored. We don't allow painted concrete block. We don't allow plain concrete block. So it's just not one of our approved materials.
So that's what he's talking about, a gray colored textured concrete
pigment is
block.
in the block.
Is that okay? Pigments in the block?
Yeah, I would call that integral colored.
We would have to look at it. If it's true integral colored concrete block, then that is a different discussion.
okay.
Would that meet the 25% upgrade requirement if it fell within that category?
If it's, if it's integral colored block, then yes, we could use that for the 25% upgrade.
Okay.
Is there any restrictions in storage size or no plan, kind of like how big can storage be, what can be parking, what can be storage? Is there like, well, you want this all to be storage, well, now you can't have a storage area of X, Y, Z on this size spot.
You just got to
storage.
screen it, so it's just kind of finding that balance for you guys.
And then I guess making sure that you also have enough parking.
Right.
Yeah, you're still gonna want the 23 parking stalls. So, or at least spaces to, yeah, so. just-
But there isn't like a hard limit on, you can only have this much storage.
He could store it, he could turn the rest of his property into storage if he
If
wanted.
you want the north side of it to be storage, I think we could work with that. We just need to screen it.
Yeah. Which is the trade-off he has to decide, was does he want to pay for paving or does he want to pay for screening?
Right.
Well, and I guess too, like the north side, let's say, sure, let's do that, but we have to get vehicles in there, so how do we accomplish that?
You can gate it.
Well, but now we're back to the fence, and to gate it, but we've got to have snow removal too. That's where we take all our snow down below, put it by that pond. Now, how do you plow around a fence?
Well, what is the berming? He could do berming instead
Yep, you could do berming and landscaping to, if we don't want to do the fence.
and then just plow through it.
Yeah, it just, I think, again, it's just that, like I said, the reason why applicants usually choose the fence, which is why I think they were asked, why their original request was a variance from the fence requirement, is because it's cheaper. It's a cheaper way to get that opacity, because you're supposed to get 80% opacity year-round. So
Yeah.
a fence is just an easier way to do that.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't make sense for their site, then we just need to figure out landscaping
Yeah.
and berming.
Well,
One-
it is, the earth is landscaping?
Berms, dirt.
You could be, a berm is would be a tool that you could use to reach
Well,
that.
I've got 15
screening.
feet of fall.
When I was driving to the site though, I can see those vehicles, so that isn't 80% opacity along that north side. So we'd have to figure out a way to landscape that to reach 80% opacity. Because basically, we should barely be able to see anything.
So driving in the driveway, you shouldn't be able to see any vehicles.
Or even just driving like from County Road 10 onto Commerce, you shouldn't be able to see anything right there, entering onto that street.
So the parking that's up around the building now, Well, that's parking.
Parking, yeah, that only needs to be screened to 3 feet, so that's like hedges. Yep.
Okay, I guess I need a little more clarification on that, because I'm thinking that berm pretty much does that now.
And it very well might, it's just something I think we're gonna have to look into. But I think there's still gonna be more landscaping that we need to do.
One of your possibilities with fencing, you talked about snow plows. One of West Side Solutions was to add a gate on the backside and plow through it.
Yeah, but you gotta clean up around it, because where I would, and maybe I gotta think this more, but where I would envision putting a fence so that that back is screened, I gotta clean that all up right to the fence, and that's monumental.
Yeah.
I mean, as it is, it's tough enough with, anytime you get cars around, any parking, you talked about this addition and having to plow snow with that bump out for parking and stuff. I got bump outs everywhere, and it is a problem. So to not put more obstacles in the way is what I want to try to do. And if it's any more trees or anything on that corner coming in, I don't care. That screens it. I mean, I kind of think it is now, but let's take a look at it and see if it needs to be better. But that should, from the street anyway, pretty much get rid of it. I mean, I have trouble from coming in off of 10, trying to look through and see if somebody picked up their truck that I was hoping was going to be gone. So Monday morning when stuff comes in, we've got a place to put it, and it's pretty tough. And I know where I'm looking.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have maybe a starting point to start digging into some stuff and then kind of take it from there.
Natalie.
I hate to interrupt you,
Yeah.
there's just a couple other small things. So the curb cut, they're showing a 33-foot curb cut where 32 is. Is that something we're willing to consider a variance on?
It's a foot, yeah.
Yeah, I would think so. It also sounds like maybe it's something that can get cleaned up. I don't know. Sounds pretty
And then
straightforward.
the use of concrete drive aprons to meet the city standard detail plate. It's a little over my head, but the engineer might be able to speak to that. Is that, do we want to continue, that's a standard that we require of everybody. Is that something that we would want to continue with this, or do we want to waive that requirement? That I don't believe is technically in city code. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but means Steve could not find it in the city code specifically. So that might be something we could waive without a variance.
It would just be a standard detail plate, so standard practice, so.
Right.
I'm trying to think of where it exists now.
Concrete apron, so it's a concrete apron between the city street
It's
and,
just like designating a driveway, yeah.
Oh.
Like a heavier duty driveway. We can look at all the other stuff down there. It works out better long-term in most cases.
Gotcha.
If there were curbing
We
along that street,
understand the setup, I mean, that's a less critical component. It's something that we would recommend. We'd have to look at how it applies equitably in the area.
if there were curbing along the street, would the curb count as this apron, or would that be an additional several feet beyond that?
It could, but we're in a rural section in downtown still,
Yeah.
so it's harder to do that. So against some of our standards are evolving as we grow as a community, so I think it's something we can certainly have a conversation about, as, you know,
You put the street in 4 years ago,
roughly.
and there was talk of curb and gutter and so on at the time. and It was ruled out because of cost.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'd say that's another one of those things that maybe with a little
Discussion
more,
on.
yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Well, it's a starting point.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Much
you.
Appreciate it.
Hope it helps.
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely. All right, and we'll go in to 8H, which is the Northeast District Plan, and I know Erin has some comments that she's been patiently waiting for about 4 hours for, so we'll let her go, and then anyone else who wants to go.
You're going to come ahead up to the podium and just give us your name and address for the record.
Okay. Would you mind just pulling this?
Let me see if I
the
can.
district plan.
Yeah.
I don't have that in my presentation.
Give me just a moment.
I know we have it
Pull
somewhere.
it up. But I can find it for us.
Otherwise, councils, we should have it, yeah, appendix
Is it this
C.
one?
I think so, or a close enough approximation. It's the overall map you're looking at, right?
Yeah.
District, gotcha.
I think it's the first, it says page
Oh,
4.
yeah.
Perfect, yeah, Jessica can work on that, and I think we all have it in our packets.
Yeah, page 4.
Next C.
It's on page 4 of the plan.
Gotcha. What item? 8. There it is. Got it. Go right ahead.
Thanks. Erin Shanahan, 9425 County Road 101. Just wanted to give you a little bit of background before I start. I moved to Corcoran about 2 years ago with my family. Previous to that, we lived in a very small townhouse, and we had always dreamed of having our own land. So buying 7 acres here in Corcoran was really a dream come true, and we spent every single penny we have on it. And I'm not lying when I say we have loved every single day. I just want to show you, just on the map, where my property is. See this pink? Right there. Right there, there's kind of like a, anyway, right there. There, right? Maybe
There.
that.
So you're down
Okay,
by the cross
exactly, That's
street?
me, right there.
Perfect.
Yep.
By the proposed,
Just north of the church.
Yeah.
Little bit.
Yep,
Yep.
right by the church. The 2 properties to the left of me, you can see they're pink, those are zoned mixed use. But right now, they're residential, there are families that live there. Oh, and I also wanted to point out this road. Yeah, this road right here, right off of 95th. This is a newly proposed road you can see runs right along my property. And I kid you not, it goes right through my neighbor's house. And I know the intention is to eventually have commercial here, but my property will still be right there, and the road will still be right there. So I watched the May 5th Planning Commission meeting on Zoom, and I think the commission had a lot of really thoughtful comments. I think in particular, Chairman Jacobs made a point that the plan didn't recognize or include consideration for the current residents of Corcoran and how they would be affected by this. And there were 2 recommendations that he made that I thought directly applied to my situation. One, that new roads were not run through existing residential areas, and that businesses that butted up against mixed-use zones had larger setbacks. And he said, because in this words, this would be adverse to the enjoyment and property value of the existing residential areas. So on page 2 of your memo that the staff wrote, you can see it says, the planning commissioners provided comments focused around preserving existing residential areas, the desire to prohibit fast food, the limitations of roads connecting to existing residential neighborhoods, and additional buffers protecting existing residential and improved setbacks on county roads, all items that would affect the current residents of Corcoran like me. And I also see the city staff chose not to include any of those recommendations in the final plan. I'm only going to reference the one street that directly affects me, and the verbiage given by the staff was street connectivity, and that some roads were built to eventually someday connect to others. I don't see any reason this road needs to be here, right there by my property. It's not connecting to any existing roads. And I don't see why County Road 30, with the desire for these commercial businesses, couldn't be the entrance there. I'm even okay with this part here. For the additional buffers, the reason in the memo is it would limit the ability of existing smaller adjacent parcels from developing without requesting a variance and would limit the amount of usable space to the property. To me, when I read this, it says
We value these businesses and their vision of the property, and we don't want to limit them. And I know this process for this plan has been going on for a while, and tonight's kind of the completion of it. And I don't want you to think that I'm just turning up at the last minute. I attended the first open house. My husband attended the second open house. I told you we watched the Planning Commission meeting, and I wasn't able to comment because I had some technical difficulties, unfortunately. Kind of in closing, I know that we want to attract business and their dollars. I know we want to bring in money for the city, but I feel like this plan is doing it at the expense of my dream. The businesses right up against my property will make my land value plummet. The road is going to take away my sanctuary and our privacy and will make me concerned about my children's safety. It's concerning to me that there's not more consideration for existing residents in this plan. It's concerning that the Planning Commission's very valid comments were not included. There's more than trees and bee gardens and electric vehicles, stations in this plan. There are families like mine who have worked their whole lives to live here in Corcoran, and kind of at the risk of sounding dramatic, please don't destroy that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone wishing to comment online can press star 9 or click raise your hand function, but at this time, unless anyone
That's it?
comes to the podium, no one's raising their hand.
Sounds good. Did anyone have any questions off of that, or anywhere they wanted to start us with this? The road one is, I know, one that was brought up by Dean Jacobs, as Aaron mentioned before, and it's a tricky one to me too, because I get the concern. I also don't know if I get what the alternative is that we can show on a.
I have an alternative.
Awesome.
May I see the pointer? One that
I don't have a good one.
It costs you $20.
So this one is kind of unique in that I think it's the only road that runs parallel to an existing residential development. One thing that we could do is, it looks like it's intended to line up with 95th Avenue, which is across the, is that 101 there? We could take this spur and either shift it north, or you could remove it, and whatever businesses develop here could access directly onto 30 or to this north-south street that kind of dead ends against the neighborhood. I'm not sure if there are other streets that have the same kind of problem. It looks like for most of the rest of them, they are terminating or running within areas that are expected to develop. Maybe I've missed some, though.
I think most of the others are just guided on large parcels that are on.
Right.
Right.
See,
Single residence.
That's my concern, is that it's not necessarily at all saying that this is where a road is going to go through. It's that this is an area, if all of this develops, that a road would go in general.
I feel like if it ends up on a map, it's going to get pushed in the future when some other council is here, some other staff is here. So we should try to make it fit our vision for the district, assuming that whatever we have in the plan will end up happening.
Gotcha. I guess my thought was that it's so hypothetical, because you don't know what businesses or whatever could develop there. You don't know if all of that's developing at once, depending on what type of business it is, or if it was houses or whatever, it would result in a completely different type of street and street location, was kind of my thought, is that it's, but how do you show that on a map? I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, whoop, Alan's got the pointer.
Go ahead.
I know what you're going through. I moved to Maple Grove in 1987. In 1990, I saw a ghost plat like this on my property. Roads going straight through my 5 acres. No way is that ever going to happen. 20 years later, it happened. It took 20 years for them to get to me. it doesn't help, but these are hopeful, ghost-plotted plans, so to speak, and they can change significantly or they cannot. You got a beautiful piece of property north of the church there. I have numerous friends back there, and they're all asking the same thing. So it's a, what do we call it? Design guidelines, possible district plans and stuff. How sure are we of these roads and streets going in these exact spots? We aren't, but we've got to have a plan, correct?
Mr. Mayor, Council, correct. So I think the term that our Public Works Director likes to use is these are fat line markers.
Yeah. Who's that?
That guy?
Yeah, I know. Kevin's Corner.
I
Sorry.
do want to point out that we are limited on county roads with spacing.
Yeah.
And so that's why we are showing us the space, the intersection there, because that's where the county said that they would want to see spacing. And as Councilor Nichols pointed out, is the idea is it needs to line up with 95th Avenue as much as possible, because you can't have the roads offset, and the county isn't going to let us do that. So that's why it's shown where it is. As far as cutting through their property, I don't believe that would be the intent at all. I think that's just because the line is so thick, it's showing like that. It would be, most likely what's going to happen is when the pink parcels come in, we're going to be working within that plot of land with the road, so.
The other limitation there is the wetlands.
They saw the wetlands in there, yeah.
So, I mean, if there's gonna be a street connection, that's gonna be the location the county's gonna approve. And so, in my mind, their issue is it's either gonna be connected, which public safety would support, which Public Works would support from a connectivity standpoint. So really, it's either gonna be at that location, or it's gonna be a dead end, and that's the future decision. Most likely, Public Works, Public Safety, the county recommendation is gonna be to connect it, but that would be a future decision. I don't know where we could show it other than that, personally. You know, keep in mind 30's, 610's about a mile east, gonna be connecting to 30. That's a significant corridor. That's not gonna be granted flexibility from the county, right, in all reality, as the area develops. So if, I think the choices are show it there or remove it, really, just to be upfront with the other limitations of the area. And and it's a fat line marker, but that's designating, that's the conversation. It's gonna be at that, across from 95th, or it's gonna be a dead end. And I guess that's up to you to how you wanna show it in this plan, but.
Yeah, and I mean, in reality, it doesn't happen unless those landowners sell. So you could sit there till the day you die and it's not gonna happen. Now, caveated though, the people that lived on Hunter Drive probably never thought that strip of land, that spit of land was gonna be taken and that street become a through street. So I would share your worry about a line on a map, because there's been plenty of lines on the maps that are coming true in this city. You look down at the storage and the development off 55. There's a line there that's going to connect through. Gleason Road cutting through 116 was a line on a map at one time. Hunter Drive was a line on a map. I think that's probably where some of Dean's comments were coming from, is the people that think they live on cul-de-sacs that aren't really cul-de-sacs. At some point when development comes, those are gonna be through streets. So I understand your concern. It's a line on a map, but no, as long as you don't go anywhere, it's not gonna go anywhere.
My only other thought is there a way to show it better that, we plug in those fixed points, kind of like you're talking about, like the intersections that the county is going to designate, and somehow clarify that this is a search area for a road as opposed to a even fat marker path or whatever.
Great question.
to like have like an asterisk by it.
Something like that. It keeps it from showing an exact route. And it,
We could maybe change the key of the map to say search area for road connectivity. Maybe do that, if that would make you more comfortable.
potentially.
There are other roads that just end. I would be okay with it just being shown as a cul-de-sac too.
Which one? The
The one we've been talking about, the
I mean,
ones
but-
at 95th currently.
cul-de-sacing where? I guess I'm a little confused on what you're,
So in that parcel, there's a larger parcel and then there's a rectangle in the bottom right-hand corner. You could have a cul-de-sac in the middle of that bottom right-hand corner one, instead of connecting all the way to 101.
I'm trying to get this. I'm a little confused on
Hey, I
that.
apologize, I'm not quite understanding. You're saying,
End it here,
Yeah.
approximately here, or?
I would go a little farther to the southeast so that it encompasses more of that smaller parcel, but it just wouldn't connect to 101. A little farther to the right. Yeah.
Doesn't that just create the same issues just somewhere else?
No, because it's not becoming a through street. It would be an access point that would feed into that north-south and thereby to 30. And it would also connect to the west to 116.
yeah, the biggest, to stop it there and not have it connect on the other. I mean, I guess the only concern is if you look at, that's a long time to not have any access out onto 101, but, I mean, we can make that change.
Well, you've got Mystique Drive for that neighborhood, and to the north, you've got the one that goes into Bellwether.
Mystique Drive on 101? Is Mystique Drive on 101?
Yep, it connects
Okay.
just north of the
You just don't have an
loop.
intersection shown there? Okay.
And Mystique Drive would connect through back to that light gray east-west as well. So you'd have access from the north and the south.
Okay. I guess I'm willing to make that concession.
I mean, you can draw it on a map, but no guarantee in the future that that line wouldn't come back, because you're talking a business park. You're not gonna run business through the residential neighborhood to the south.
Oh, yeah. You
Just
go
like
through
it's
30.
not locked in now, wouldn't be locked in.
Yeah.
The alternative.
Yeah, so, I mean, we could scrub the line off the map, but I wouldn't hang your hat on that.
To Councilmember Schultz, it also depends on how that property comes in.
Yep.
If it comes in more easterly and the only good connection is out that way, it's gonna put more pressure on that point, right? And if a larger piece comes in and the development can stage itself differently and maybe it can access more primarily off of 30. So there's just a ton of unknowns. What we're trying to do here is show you is that's where the conversation will go to that point when that property develops, primarily due to the limitations in the wetlands and where the county's gonna control spacing on significant intersections. So it's highlighting that conversation will come up when development comes. And so whether you dead end it or not, it's really gonna focus on that connection. So that's the point.
The Cherry Lane going north, and then it hooks to that north-south spot. That's a cul-de-sac right now with the houses right at the end of the cul-de-sac and stuff. So I mean, that's a ghost plotted plan too for a long ways down the road. So it doesn't help the mindset very much, but
And frankly, those are challenging connections where you have houses that have been there 30 years and now you're gonna, even connect to that. I mean, those are challenging,
Yeah.
land use lines,
Yep.
planner, I'm gonna take my planner hat off, but those are huge conversations.
Right, and even Hunter Lane, those folks adjacent to Gleason Parkway, there was a half right-of-way there. It was always planned to connect between 116 and 101. But it didn't, and so people start using that. Same thing with Cherry Lane, that right-of-way is there to extend quite a bit past that where.
is it, because it's
Yes.
it's cut like a cul-de-sac
There's a
right now.
cul-de-sac, temporary cul-de-sac, but
And
the
then the
right-of-way
drive-
extends
it
forward.
is a temporary.
And people
Thank you.
don't read their
Thank you.
surveys, and they don't know where their property line is, and so it does get super tricky.
Yep.
Well, it even gets more confusing when the city paves those dead ends as a cul-de-sac. We have 63rd in our neighborhood that appears to be a cul-de-sac, but it's planned to be a through street
With no signage.
with no signage.
We do
And
now.
We do now, but
That's
like
just gonna be
25
my
years
point.
ago, there was no signage, and that complicates things.
Right.
Well, I guess getting back to your specific point, Jeremy, I'd be fine making that change if we think it, we talked about how it doesn't really set anything in stone either way, but that's.
Tie goes to the runner.
I'd be fine making that, sure, making that change on that, and then I think some of the other concerns maybe that you brought up are things that are being still looked at with some of the buffer discussion and some of the setback discussions that aren't necessarily part of the plan, but would be in effect for all the areas of the plan and throughout the city. So those definitely are being taken into account, just a little slow process, but.
I need a little clarification.
Yeah.
As we're looking at those.
So so with our conversation of, setting expectations, are we completely removing the red intersection symbol as well? Or are we just stopping the blue line?
I can't
Because
see
the
that
danger
one.
of that is if we don't show it, people will be surprised by it later if that is indeed what ends up happening, is the counter side to that. So we can definitely make whatever change you suggest, but I just, that is a counter argument.
Can you just leave the intersection point in the road to TBD later?
I think we could
That would
maybe
be
stop
my
the
thought.
blue line, and then we could maybe have a slightly different symbol for this red intersection, just so that it's noted that that is where the county is going to want to see the
Right.
connection.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd note it just like that county,
Okay.
Anticipated county.
yeah,
All right.
yep,
Connection or something, access, anticipated county access.
something like that.
Okay.
Perfect.
I had a comment on page 8.
Okay.
It shows the collector street, local street. I like these. I had one suggestion for the local street and possibly the collector street. So the planting strips, the 8-foot planting strips, I was on a street a little bit ago that had maybe like a 2-foot wide miniature sidewalk right up against the road so that when you park alongside, you're not walking in the landscaping in the planting strip. I don't know if we need to show something like that in our plan, but it seems like that might be a nice way to have a little bit of a public safety aspect to street parking so that people aren't trying to climb through a bunch of mulch or whatever as they're getting in and out of their cars.
I don't see an argument against that.
Okay.
I think you're just referring to a maintenance strip, which public, I mean, it would, I think that's just a detail
Yeah.
that would get refined in a standard detail point, but to your point, those are all things that would be, we kind of do those, I think, in some of the, in different ways in the cul-de-sacs in Ravinia, where we'll do like a mow area to keep the rocks from going, so there's different combinations of stuff that makes sense. Sometimes with the trail, if it has to encroach a little bit, we need to maintain that appropriate separation between the trail and the road. We'll switch materials or something to designate that, so to your point, I would anticipate seeing some combination of those throughout the area.
Counselor Nichols, from what I'm hearing, it would make sense to have that be an engineering design standard we establish, not necessarily something that's specifically on the plan, but something that we could work with Public Works on, and that would just be something applied wherever that makes sense.
Universally, not just in the Northeast District?
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, as long as it's being done.
Just sitting here reading this, if I may. The title of this Northeast District Plan, to me, it's, now that I've read it and paid attention more than I have, this is where roads are going, this is what's gonna happen, this is it. Couldn't it say Northeast Concept Plan or something a little less permanent, if that makes sense?
I think it's following the naming standard that we have for our
Okay.
Southeast District and our Southwest District, but
And you want to be able to enforce it too, when,
when we're working with developers
Versus a guide.
who, yeah.
Yeah, I'm,
like you never put a should in a procedure, right? It's got.
I know, I've been through what you're through, what's going through your mind. 20 years of sitting there and all of that stuff, and it's just, I think I said the same things back then, it's a concept. The roads are gonna go somewhere in this general vicinity, and that's actually what happened. It's general vicinity. It changed significantly from a district plan or a concept plan, like I'm saying.
Maybe there's certain areas, like on the subtitle of that, you know, it's a concept road plan. Or
If we've got one person in our audience, we've got a number of people that are concerned,
yeah,
so.
I had another item on
Yeah.
page 10,
okay.
the fiber reinforced cement board siding. I think that's perfectly fine for residential, but I don't know that I would be okay with, like, I'm envisioning party board. I don't know that I would consider that a class 1 in an industrial or commercial or business park necessarily. So I was going to propose that we limit that to residential uses and not industrial or commercial uses. I'd be okay with like the large panels potentially that we saw with St. Therese. But I want to limit it so that we don't end up with office park that has, 8-inch lap siding on it.
Well, I've seen plenty of businesses that have a residential look to them that use LP Smart Side on it. That looks pretty nice.
I think you could still use the number 10, other materials of similar quality, to allow those. But it would give you more discretion than allowing it blanket for everything.
Thoughts on that?
Counselor Nichols was nice enough to bring this up before the meeting. There's no strong objection to that change. We do think there could be a place for it for commercial. But as you said, we do have that caveat. So if it's something that we're just open to reviewing later on, then I'm fine with having residential only added to number 6 on there.
Okay, and thoughts on Jeremy's comment about the alternative, the other way to get some of that lap siding? And if they're on a commercial building?
The number 10, that's already
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. If we're open to considering like a commercial development that's using it under that standard, under that
Gotcha, okay.
item, then I'm fine with that.
Gotcha. I'd be on board with that. Okay.
And then on page 14, I like the tree list. I was also going to suggest that we consider on the deciduous trees, trying to put a limit on how many trees can be from one genus. So you don't end up with, 50% of the trees being maples, and then in 30 years, there's some exotic pest that destroys all of our maple trees. We already have, staff pointed out, a restriction on you can't have more than X% species, but species level, there's 6 different kinds of maple, and all of them are different species. So you don't get quite the same level of variety necessarily from that.
So adding another type of limitation on genus.
And I would just float the number 25%, but.
Yeah, I guess I don't know enough about if that number makes sense, but I think the concept makes sense.
A lot of these trees, or most of these trees, native to Minnesota,
Yes.
so there's no exotic trees in here or outside of our ecosystem.
I don't think so.
Okay.
So are you saying that you're not as concerned about that?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me if they're native trees to Minnesota. They're up to our environment. I just don't want
Well,
to
except
introduce
for
them.
elms, and except for ashes.
Yeah, they were all introduced at some point. I mean, they were either burl oak or
In here?
northern pine forest at one point,
Okay.
so.
Mr. Mayor, Council, hear what you're saying, and we're not opposed to changing it to 25%, but that is actually verbiage that's in our zoning ordinance, so maybe that's just something that we need to address with the zoning ordinance, and again, that'd be a universal rule that we apply.
Gotcha.
Versus putting it in this plan.
Okay.
I'd be okay with that too.
Then let's handle it that way,
Okay.
or we'll look into it that way. Sounds good. Jeremy, did you have anything else?
That is all that I had.
Okay. Dean or Alan? I covered a lot of my big ones. The one, and I know I had a brief conversation with Natalie about, that just didn't seem as critical to me is some of the EV requirements and stuff like that. I know Natalie, you had some thoughts. Did you maybe want to share the thing you mentioned to me?
Yeah, so I strongly believe that EV infrastructure is going to be a strength in the next 20 years. Obviously, right now, it seems a little forward-thinking, but I think that's a good thing. So if it comes down to, we don't like that we're requiring it of all development, staff is open to moving that to where we have the landscaping options, and then maybe retitling landscaping option to resiliency options, because they all kind of play into different strategies for resilience in the area. And then, so then developers could choose to do EV infrastructure when it makes sense for them as part of the standards, because they need to do 2 of that list. Since we're now adding this, we can maybe require 3. But I think that would be a change that staff is open to, if, rather than gutting the entire EV infrastructure.
Okay.
I think, what I remember from conversation, we talked about EV was market, we were gonna go by market driven and not necessarily mandated.
Yeah.
City, but
I would keep them just because there are so many ways to get them installed. There are private companies that put them in basically for free, and then they charge people to use them. I don't see it as a burden on the development to have some low level of requirement. And we will see them continue to proliferate as the costs continue to shift in their favor. I mean, they're at cost parity now over the life of a vehicle. They're saying within 5 years, because the cost of assembly are dropping and the cost of materials are dropping, they'll end up being cheaper to purchase as well. So it just gives a chance to get ahead of that trend.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think, what was the requirement? 5% for multifamily residential? And then someone wrote a letter, made a good point that 1% of Minnesota's registered cars are EV, not 5%. So we're asking for 5 times. I think if a developer really wants it as a selling point to his apartment building or townhome complex, he's gonna put it in on his own. I'd rather have that than mandate it. You know, we're not mandating hydrogen charging or refilling stations either, and that's an alternative fuel that you can buy on commercial vehicles right now. You know, we don't have propane refilling stations for vehicles, which you can run vehicles on. We're not, why are we gearing our ordinances directly to one industry in that regard?
I would say because of the growth trend, right? I mean, it's 1% of the vehicles, but it's 3 to 4% of sales, and it's climbing.
Yeah, but
And it'll continue to do so based on the cost trend.
We're using government mandate to benefit a business segment, one over another. I would personally just say, take out the restriction and encourage developers to do it.
So move it to one of the options, the list of options, and then we would have 7 options for people to choose from.
That would be my preference.
I'd rather go that way too.
Okay.
I want to be hopeful of electric vehicles, but I'm awful skeptical about
Yeah.
what's going on and the amount of resources it takes to make them. Amount of natural resources it takes to make them. I agree with Alan. No mandate.
I'd be fine with that.
The
as well.
businesses will do it themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so keep it, but move it to landscaping options, and then maybe retitling landscaping options to resiliency options.
Yep.
Okay,
Sounds good.
all right.
Keep it at 2? Or make it
Do we want to keep it at 2 that they need to choose, or do we want to move it up to 3? Because now we kind of have a list, move it up to 3. Okay, all right. We will make that change.
Works. Sounds good. Is there any other big items?
No.
Nope. Okay. Anything else from you two? From the peanut gallery?
We're talking about what I'm gonna buy in a year.
I'm sorry.
Nice. Okay, then, give me 1 second, and I'll try to find, if we don't have any other changes we want to make.
Pull up the recommended,
Motion?
yep.
I think I've got it.
It's the three ordinance, or the 2 ordinances and 1 res.
And it would be with the amendments as?
With the amendments as provided to staff.
Perfect. I will go ahead and make a motion to adopt ordinance 2022-459, approving an amendment to the zoning ordinance, and resolution 2022-61, approving the findings of fact, as well as summary ordinance 2022-460, all as amended by the discussion we've had here.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for speaking tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, guys. Let's see, anyone need a break, or we want to power through these last few?
I think they vote for powering through.
Powering through? Think we can do that?
Yeah.
Perfect. We'll go right into 9A. We do have a public comment opportunity for 9A and B if anyone's on. Oh, Rick, what?
Come to the podium and state your name and address, that'd be great. And anyone joining virtually, if you want to press *9 or raise your hand, we'll recognize you next.
Are you here primarily for 9B?
I thought they were bundled.
No,
They are.
A and B.
Oh, okay.
Do you want it? We can separate
I was gonna move 9B for you up.
Yeah, I'd
Go
be in
for it.
favor of that.
Go for it.
I'm talking Hackamore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would suggest can we move the agenda item 9B in front of 9A?
That's
Yeah.
certainly up to see the.
We'll go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're not.
No,
He's
it's
getting
been a
paid.
long- I don't know how you guys do this, but I'm going home after I'm done with this.
My alarm is going to go off in 3 hours and 40 minutes
That's
from
right.
right now, man.
My name is Greg Hogan. I'm at 19220 Hackamore Road. In the agenda, in the packet tonight, there's a report from WSB. That's not you guys, right? Okay. And I've probably been a resident longer than anyone in this room, having lived on Hackamore for 23 years. And I distinctly remember sitting in these chambers with Mayor Gunther. That was a fun meeting. And Mr. Thomas. And throughout that process of a Laurent proposed development and then a Lennar proposed development, a natural question was, am I going to be assessed for road improvements on Hackamore Road? And often, and many times in the public record, and you can go back, that it was referenced that the residents would not be assessed, okay? So there's a long history of that. In this report tonight that you have in front of you, I noticed in the 75% report, there's all the way through this whole thing, that special assessments benefiting single-family property owners are not being proposed by the city at this time. So that's always been the precedent, okay? In this report, somehow whoever does this comes out, it's now at 100%. In one of the pages, it's understood that the city of Corcoran is planning to assess adjacent property owners with future development potentials, and in parentheses, Gagne and Hoagland, but none other. So, you've got a road, it's my understanding, whether it's a $7 million project, and the city of Medina is going to pay 3.5, and we're going to pay 3.5. One, why is my name singled out in this report? Who is Who is referencing me? My name is Greg Hoagland. I'm a sales manager. I'm a citizen. I'm not a developer. Okay? I just own a plot of land. And contrary to public opinion, the next property over is owned by an LLC. Okay? So my point is, it's almost like it's a personal thing. Like there's references throughout that document to Hoagland. Who's ever saying Hoagland, does that mean just Greg? If there's 22 landowners on Hackamore, none of them get assessed, but Greg and Jackie get assessed? Is that how it's going to work? Because that's how it's written in the document, okay? And so I want a clarity tonight that single-family landowners on Hackamore Road are not going to be assessed for Hackamore Road improvements. Because if you are saying I am, but 20 other people are not, then we have a problem. Okay? And I don't know if it's a legal problem or what it is, but it doesn't fit the precedent all the way back to 2014 with your friend Mr. Gunther and Thomas. Okay? The other one is, if you are going to assess me, I would like a natural accounting, because I believe the city took $1.4 million for Ravinia in 2014 and put it in a fund that's probably still there, and you probably took some money from Tavara, whatever that is, and I'd love to understand what the gap is today if you guys are paying $3.5 or $3 million at the city of Medina. I have the right to just understand and clarify, I guess, and report that you're going to come at me for assessments. Is that correct?
And do you want
So I can speak a little bit to the assessments in general, that as on our staff report, we mentioned that assessments for future development properties potential. So we were not envisioning to do special assessments for individual properties that are single-family homes. Is that correct, Kevin?
That's been, Mr. Hogan's correct, we have been communicating single family would not be discussed. We have not, this is part of the conversation we're getting into tonight, is how are we approaching the larger developable parcels? Are they defined as single family, or are they defined as something different? That conversation is part of the process.
That conversation should have happened years ago.
So that's something that has to be discussed with council on what our approach is. That's why it's in there as potential. So that's something that we should talk about tonight.
Yeah, you should talk about it, and you should have done it. But it has been clarified for years that a single-family resident is not going to be assessed there. And I don't know, I honestly do not know why my name is referenced. I'm Greg Hoagland at 19220. That's all I am, okay? I have an interest in some neighboring properties. I don't own the properties. You saw Mr. Schnell down here. He was here. But why am I being singled out today? And I'd love some clarity on it. Thank you.
That's great.
And on to that question, I think when the report was provided to us from WSB, they were looking at the potential development. I can't speak to why they put in particular names, but
Well,
I think it was.
maybe that should be looked at in terms
the
of,
potential development.
It was just poorly written.
yeah.
Yes, I don't think it was intentional, it was not
There's
something.
several references.
There's at least two on page 2 and 3. But I don't think it's an intent of this council or any council to assess an individual property owner for a road improvement that's caused by development.
What would have been the right way to write it?
So.
Pulte Homes, Walcott Glen,
I mean,
or leave it all out of it
PUD number.
altogether?
I-
PUD number?
either PID numbers,
Yep.
Future
PID
subdivision.
numbers,
Yeah.
or just, note that it was future development. That was something that we didn't catch in reviewing the staff report. So I do apologize. It was not intentional and just,
My concern was if the previous thing was denied earlier today, I guess the double whammy would be that I'm being assessed
Yep.
here in the coming months.
and like I said, one of the things we're looking at is whether or not to do assessments on those parcels that could potentially develop. So that's a big part of the discussion today. So,
Do we-
Question on that topic from a policy perspective. I know when we were doing assessments for other road projects, we would offer the typically 10-year extension. We would sell bonds, and then there'd be a deferral until that property actually developed, then it would all become due. I don't think we've talked about a similar situation for a significant development. Would we follow a similar model if we went down that road, or how would that work mechanically?
I'd have to review our assessment policy to be certain, but that we would want to follow our policy related to that. So that is all part of the discussion. And just one of the questions was about the gap and where we're at. There are funds, some funds that have been allocated, as well as some commitments from other projects that don't necessarily, I think, have a formalized amount related to it. So it's a little bit uncertain on what that exact amount is going to be. Somewhere in the 2 to 3.
Yeah, I think the issue is on a complicated corridor this large, you could individually have 4 different projects by 3 different developers, and have 3 different inconveniences, or you could look at a contribution from all, work with the parties that have requirements, kind of package that together. There is going to be a gap. Today's conversation is how are we going to handle that gap? Because it's a road shared with a neighboring community. So at some point, we have to come to some consensus on framework so that we can start executing how this actually will happen. We're at that point to have those conversations. So the questions really are, how do we want to handle the gap? We don't know exactly what the gap value is completely. It could vary a lot. It can vary in timing. It can vary if we get more funding commitments from Hennepin County. It could vary on if we choose to assess developable lots or define them as single family. And that's a city of Corcoran decision that we have to have. So that's all important to start talking about today and collect information if you guys have questions on that so we can bring that back to you. And that's really the goal of this, was to start those conversations with the 2 communities of how do we package a deal if we're going to do a deal, right? And there's some questions to be answered. The 2 primary ones are the gap and are we considering assessments at all? And the distinction would be does the city of Corcoran envision properties that have come in for multiple development applications differently than single family? And we'd have to evaluate that and have a preliminary conversation with you on, do you want us to look into that as a possibility, or do you want that off the table? That's really, I think, what Mr. Hogan's asking for too.
Well, then, I just have a clarifying question. I'm sorry, may I?
No, go ahead.
Okay. My clarifying question would be, what is considered a developable lot? Because it wouldn't seem like we don't want to just penalize somebody who owns land. So is that requirement a certain number of acres? Is that requirement that a proposed development has come through for that parcel of land? Or is it really just because they own a significant amount of acreage? And if that's the way to go, as somebody who owns not a ton of acreage, but enough, that's concerning, personally.
Well, he's within the MUSA So he's at his minimum lot, right? He can't subdivide his lot on his own.
I do not believe so, based on, there's no development rights, so it would have to be.
So his lot is no more developable than my lot. So to me, it's a single-family home. Now, whether someone, like a developer comes in and buys it and turns it into his development and subdivides it, that's a different story. And that's where I can see where assessment comes in, or,
And to that point, other developments have a portion that they've, it's the impact on their development on particular connections that is really, it's about feasibility and what that development, how it impacts the connection.
right. Tavera has an impact on traffic, Ravinia has an impact on traffic, Eagle Brook would have had an impact on traffic. Whatever comes next on this parcels, if it's a large development, will have an impact on traffic.
So-
But one individual landowner sitting in a single-family home has no impact than anyone else. And I would suggest there's probably more impact on that road from people outside of Corcoran than there is from people living on that strip.
You've improved 1,000 homes west of me, and I have to pay for the road.
Yeah, I'm gonna strike this down as a clerical error,
Yep.
and I would suggest if we sign this agreement, we have that stricken from it or rewritten in some way.
And we're just looking for direction tonight.
Tonight, we're not approving.
Oh, we're not
this.
approving?
No.
This
Okay.
is really an update. We wanted to be consistent with the cities and on our, making sure we're presenting the same message to each group on what kind of what the plan would look like. So we'd be bringing that back for June 9th approval if we get feedback that we want to move forward with the project itself. I think, well, we do have some history on this parcel, and we could probably stray from our policy generally with road improvements. We'd have to evaluate each one, decide whether or not we do assessments based on the policy.
The policy deals with the increase in value from the project being done. How would you assess that differently for a developable versus non-developable parcel?
Great question, and that was part of what we would.
That would be an appraiser,
explore.
we'd have to have an appraisal opinion on what that value is.
Similar to like we do at anytime we look at assessments, would be looking at an appraisal from appraisal.
Okay. Trying to think where that takes us next here on this. I mean, we talked about some of the stuff we'd like re-examined in when we look at it next, but in terms of action items on this.
Yeah, I think action items really is to provide feedback. Do we want to move forward with exploring Pakenham and move forward with this framework that outlines 50% of the gap? As we mentioned, there are lots of moving pieces, and we don't know what that is, and based on the last year May projected total cost, it was something, and as of today, it could be a lot different. So what I was thinking about the gap that we've talked about could be completely different because of the environment that we're in. So it very much, it could vary a lot, and we just don't know the answer to what that looks like today. And it, as we talked about, it depends some on what happens with one of the developments that was tabled tonight and the impact that has. So
I really think the direction at all, even if it's in question form, would be whatever the gap is, what is a fair cost share with staff recommending 50-50. I believe Medina had a work session ahead of this that supported a 50-50 cost share of the gap. So is that supported by Corcoran Council or not? And then the other question where we would be is if you want to say no to any assessments, we would know that, take that back, build that into a plan in the proposal. if you wanted us to evaluate that, we could bring that back also in sequence with the proposal, so you could have more conversation, more detail if you have questions. Or if you just aren't, I guess another option could be is, do you envision an entire project, or do you want to have the developments parse these out into different projects that they're responsible for? So that's probably the three things that any kind of questions or comments related to that would be helpful for us when we bring it back to you.
Let me tackle a couple of those. I think I envision the full project. I think that's kind of been the plan all along. I think that's what Medina's been discussing as well. I would, I think a lot of the details need to be figured out about what that gap is, as you guys were talking about, but the overall cost share agreement, 50-50, I think that's been pretty well understood, and I think I'm on board with that. I think that's been the previous discussion that we are as well.
Yeah. We're talking full project, but are we still talking about phasing of the project, or no?
Well, at this point, with Plymouth going, and we're over on the west side with a connection with Tavera 3rd, there's an opportunity to do the whole thing, and the benefit of that, from 101 all the way to the almost Schneider, the McCown piece, the benefit of that would be is like disturbance and economy of scale, right? If you package that large of a project, you're going to be more efficient, you're going to lower your costs, you're going to impact that zone over a year and a half versus 3 separate projects and managing that impact. So there is an opportunity to do the entire thing. If we choose to just let the developments kind of fix it, I'll call it piecemeal approach, that's going to be driven by the developments when they come in.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a little more disturbance in the corridor. Certainly can be accomplished a bunch of different ways, but there is a conversation and an opportunity to really do the whole thing, which I think would lower the overall cost versus having 3 separate contracts kind of doing the same work.
So if we do the whole thing at once, but we have a gap in funding from development, then we have to carry that cost as a city.
And there will be a gap. And that's what we're talking about today is, I think the initial projections are, 2 to 2.5 million. We're talking $1 million to $1.5 million potential gap.
Well, I'm not talking just the cost gap, but talking about the timing of the funding gap too, right? Because if Gagne doesn't develop for 10 years or gets resold to a farmer, or their property doesn't go through a development process, we're going to carry that load as a city.
Correct.
So we would end up bonding that, is my guess.
Yes, we've been planning in the 5-year financial plan for
those
this.
cases.
We had always anticipated some sort of project in the 5-year financial, at least the last several years.
Without assessments?
I think we hadn't finalized what that would look like. I can't speak to what happened in the past, just in my time here, I haven't heard whether or not we would have.
It was in writing that single-family homes would not be assessed. The conversation is that our role is identifying potential funding sources, right? The LRIP grant that we got with Medina, that's really was packaged as the whole corridor because it was more mutually beneficial. If we piecemeal this up, we might lose the $700,000 funding. Mm-hmm. We have to make a decision on does the city of Corcoran does it consider some of these properties that are owned by LLCs or that have come in from multiple plats? Is there a distinction or not? And I'm not saying that there is or isn't. It's something that we should evaluate as a funding source. If we say it's not something we want to go down, then the gap becomes the local contribution, the gap becomes larger. Or we fall back to a piecemeal approach.
Can we carry that load until a development comes in? And then charge of?
I don't think so.
We do not believe so.
Well,
So like Gagne doesn't come in for 10
evaluate
years?
that if we could assess after that. That would be, if you would like us to research that question, we could bring that back to you.
when we talked about Corcoran Trail East and West, there was a parcel that was undeveloped, no home on it, and we put a 10-year deferral, so there was no payment, it only gets triggered if they sell. I'm wondering if there's a similar mechanism that might be employed if you get a PUD approved or a higher density development and it gets rezoned, that would then trigger, but there wouldn't be a payment unless that happens, and there would be some sunset date on it,
Or replotting.
potentially.
But we're still carrying that
Yeah.
right now but it's a whole heck of a lot different than what we're talking about Hackmore. We'd still have to carry that cost. and
Cities
we're
have
talking
roads, so
millions.
we've got to come to grips with the fact that we've
Yep.
got to maintain asphalt in the city.
We gotta do
And it's
something.
not always going to be paid for by new development. We need funding mechanisms that we
Yep.
are happy using to maintain our infrastructure.
Along those lines, in the proposed development tonight, there's 5 parcels. Are you assessing just the people with frontage? Does that mean Mr. Schnell doesn't have any assessment responsibility because he doesn't have any frontage? Or on 101, the house there, what is the?
I think in the concept of the plan of the development proposal would have been by the impact of the development as a whole.
Yes, I think it depends on when a project comes in. If we're talking about if that project had come in, the project that was proposed tonight, if it had come in, it would have been the impact of the entire project. If we're talking about a different site, such as the parcel that's owned by Gagne, that has a different, I think it just needs to be evaluated on what we could do from a, what kind of, if we do want to look at deferred assessments, we still have to go through the 429 process and do our improvement notices and our assessment notices and things like that. So we'd have to do that, but I think that we need to look into it a little bit more on the, how would you do that?
Yeah, I think if you want more information on it, we could bring that back as a la carte and answer these questions. If you don't want to do that, then we won't spend the time on it, and we'll identify the gap and build that into a plan. That's really what feedback we were looking for before we march down, as we continue to march down the roads.
Thoughts? I would say to get more information on it.
Yeah, because I'd like to be able to close the gap through plottable, replotting of subdividing of land, but not on single family. Even Gagne it's being farmed right now. It could continue to be farmed, it could be resold. And what's the impact?
Yep, we can.
Somehow we gotta thread that needle.
One more comment, I think you should look at the history of Plymouth and Maple Grove, of how they did this, and I think you'll find some answers there.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, anything else on this one that you guys needed?
I think as long as everyone's comfortable with us bringing back, at this point, based on the feedback, there needs to be consensus to bring it back on June 9th with an updated WSB report.
Sure.
And we'll get you answers to some of those questions.
Sounds good.
With redefining the Hackamore parcel from 101 to Lennar
Yeah.
property.
We'll
I don't.
we'll outline, we'll work
No, I'm
on the
talking
language.
Ravini.
Into the
Okay,
agreement.
sounds good. Then we will jump back to 9A, which is the Northeast Water Supply Update.
Can we move 9 or 11A in front of them?
You guys have tomorrow off, right?
I'm gonna try to get this done today.
I might be able to save you a little bit of time. My initial thoughts on this, and feel free to weigh in, guys, that we should, given the mass amounts of variables in terms of the cost that we've seen and some of the funding options that we're looking at with that federal grant, it makes sense to get an alternate bid on all of these options, the 2-cell, 3-cell, and suppose even the site if we wanted to, but also the tower volumes.
To get multiple bids on all of them,
Yeah,
you're saying?
that would be my thought, just given, we don't know if we're gonna get, or,
Just to clarify, do we have a decision on decision item number 2?
I would say alternate site, which is,
I just wanted to clarify if we were talking about alternates on everything.
sorry, yep, that
or if
was
it
poorly
was-
worded.
You're saying going with the alternate site over Bellwether Park?
Correct, I'd say go with the alternate site and then get alternate bids on decisions
Decision
1
1
and
and
3.
3.
Yeah, but I don't think we've seen a cost on alternate site for water tower.
Gotcha, so
We
would
saw
you
an
wanna see an
estimate.
alternate bid on that as well?
I think we wouldn't, I think that would be a little too complicated for the design. We
Okay.
can do it, but it's getting to the threshold where it'd be better to, I think, ideally better to identify a site when we move forward.
Okay.
And I think the 800,000 number is still a strong number for the difference between Bellwether and the alternate site, which is near Hope Church. So I think that's gonna remain a number here in the timeline that we have to make a decision.
And that's land and infrastructure?
Land and infrastructure, yeah.
Can you get an idea of a breakdown between the two?
I think we have that. It's about, what, 7 to 1 or so. I mean, we hit, 6 to 1, 6, It's heavy on the infrastructure.
Is it? Okay.
Very heavy on the infrastructure. Whereas we usually don't post it, it's just because it's not finalized sale, but Kevin's approximate, yeah. it's about-
Yeah, I know, that would affect it, but I
It's
just,
heavy on the infrastructure.
okay.
Was there more before the decisions that?
Is there what?
That skipped over?
There was the renderings.
Sure, let's go through it.
So.
They've waited all this
Say a
time.
couple words.
Sounds good.
No, yeah, I'll keep it brief. I just wanted to give you everybody an update of kind of where we've been and what we've been up to. So, yeah, getting these decisions, again, and looking forward is, our goal is to be wrapping up preliminary design. We've had a number of meetings related to the water treatment plant that have been really productive. And so we're really happy with the progress we've been making. And so then our proposal will be that on June 23rd, we bring our authorization for final design. And getting these decisions helps us scope out what that's going to be. So very, very helpful to have that input from folks. And
Sorry, everyone.
Not as helpful to have that?
Nope, sorry, I'm working on getting it back up. Not
That's
sure
okay.
where
No,
it's
it's
gone.
okay. Yeah, and so then to identify the site with the water tower will be really helpful. We can move more on that. Well one is in construction. That's been going smoothly. Test well number 2 will start soon. And then yes, we do have some updated renderings because I wanted to add some visual for you too. They wrap up at night, so. Those are kind of some perspective cuts, looking from the southwest, and then kind of the northwest. So we've had productive meetings with the building official to get a once-over of how we have things laid out to make sure there's proper egress, and so we've been making those additions. So with your input, what we would do is, basically create kind of a parallel design that would have the 3 cells, so that, again, that building would grow out to the north. And so we would prepare design documents that would outline both of those options. Contractor would see those, be able to bid both, and then that would give you the flexibility once those costs are bid, and you can make more informed decisions given the unknowns, so.
Can we add 2 cupolas to the roof?
Yes, yeah, and certainly, I mean, again, this is our first, our base cut kind of, an architectural rendering from taking, your input to date. And definitely over the next several months, we'll be having more targeted discussions on the architecture. So we'll work with Kevin to figure out the best strategy so that we make those important decisions.
Any particular reason why there's stairs on the outside of the building?
Yeah, so the stairs on the outside of the building there are just for egress. And so you need to have 75 feet between either an outdoor exit or a 1-hour fire door. And so that area across the filters where those 3 windows are, that area ends up being about 60 feet. So to be able to get down how the mezzanines are laid out, that becomes necessary. So with the 3-cell design, we would envision having those stairs inside, because you'd still need some egress and things like that.